I did over 2,000 fights to try and scientifically determine the strongest bug type in Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green, and today I'm going to be ranking all of them. We start at number 12 with the worst bug type, which is, unsurprisingly, Caterpie. And I might as well just say it, at number 11 is Weedle. Now, how I'm going to be ranking all of these Pokemon is that I'm going to go through each important fight of the game in order and challenge them in two different ways. First, a 1v1 against each Pokemon they have, and then a fight against their team as a whole. These fights include the three variations of the rivals starting from Nugget Bridge, Gym Leaders, Evil Boss, and the Elite Four. Then, depending on the result, a score is going to be given with 1 point for winning every 1v1 and another for a sweep. So, for example, Weedle could defeat only Geodude against Brock and not Onix. And as for the sweep, he also wasn't able to, so that's half a point. If he got a sweep, it would have been 1.5 points. All of these points then get turned into a percentage that goes from 0 to 100 to show how useful a Pokemon is in a playthrough. If you want a more detailed explanation, there's going to be a Google Doc in the description with more information. Now, going into the early bug types, in terms of moves, both have access to the move String Shot to lower the opponent's speed, which can work to counter stuff like sleeping moves. The differences come in Weedle having Poison Stick, a 15 base power move with a 30% chance to poison, and Caterpie having Tackle, the stronger neutral move in 35 base power, which in this generation is 95% accurate. And that's it! In the end, with this moveset, Weedle ended up being useful in the most number of fights. Let's first go over the individual fights in which both of them ended up winning. It was against the rivals Abra and Rattata on Nugget Bridge, against Lieutenant Surge's Pikachu, and against the rivals Alakazam on Silph Go. As for the sweeps, yeah, they didn't get a single one. But now let's go over the differences and why Weedle is better than Caterpie. First with Caterpie, he could beat only one fight that Weedle couldn't, and that was against the rivals Raticate on the SSN. Nothing much to say, just not triggering his ability Guts and having a stronger move in Tackle, cannot believe I'm actually saying that, worked better than Poison Sting for that fight. As for Weedle, he could beat 5 fights that Caterpie couldn't. Those were Brox's Geodude, the rival's Squirtle on Nugget Bridge, Giovanni's Rhyhorn on the Rocket Hideout, Erika's Tangela, and the rival's Execute before the league. It turns out that neither of those two rock types have a strong move or a rock type one, so I could just wait for the poison to knock them out. As for Tangela, even with Ingrain, a super effective move alongside the poison and double resisting her moves did the job. The same for Execute, who only had Solar Beam to attack. Finally for the Squirtle, he just went for Withdraw and Tail Whip while the poison KO'd him. As for the negatives, you'll always feel like you're playing with 5 Pokemon instead of 6. The base total of both of them is one of the lowest in the game, only behind Azurill and Sunkern. They only learn 2 moves with only one of them being able to do damage, and even when you obtain them at the start of the game, they do nothing for the team. Well, besides KOing Pokemon that are weaker than a paper towel on the physical side, or that have literally nothing to attack them with. All of this amounts to being the weakest bug types, if not the weakest Pokemon in Fire Red Leaf Green, with Caterpie having a score of 4.97 and Weedle having a score of 6.54. Now, just as a side note, because I really want to talk about this fight, I tried the fight against the rivals Alakazam on Silph Go 5 times with Weedle. In all 5 times, I ended up winning. He just kept going for Future Sight even when he already used it. If I then managed to get just one turn of poison, it was enough to defeat him. Anyways, at number 10, this is going to be Metapod, and it has an almost identical performance compared to its pre-evolution. Same KOs against the rivals, same performance against the first 2 gyms, same KOs against Lieutenant Surge. The main difference comes in getting access to Harden, which maximizes the value of the leftovers against physical attackers. As alongside the ability Shed Skin, it makes fights against physical attackers that were impossible for Caterpie, well, possible. With this, Metapod defeated the Koffings on Koga's team because of Self-Destruct, Giovanni's Nidorino in Silph Go, and Giovanni's Dugtrio, Nidoqueen, and Nidoking on the gym fight. If you're wondering about how he did against Bruno, yeah, Tackle is way too weak for the fighting types. So you're going to run out of power points before you can KO anything on his team. He may not have swept an entire team with this setup, but in individual fights, he did pretty well. I mean, for a Metapod, that is. Unfortunately, only having Tackle as an attacking move means that even after using power-up points, you're going to struggle. And I mean that literally, as in you're going to eventually use the move Struggle, making some of the individual fights last over 5 minutes. Also, if you get hit by a strong critical hit move, if they have a single special move or a status that doesn't get healed with Shed Skin like Leech Seed, or if the opponent doesn't even give you the chance of setting up Harden, there's nothing you can do, making the whole strategy worthless. So while being an interesting way of getting more victories than its pre-evolution, it's not really a reliable one. But it's enough to get Metapod a score of 7.47. At number 9, this is going to be Kakuna. Like when comparing Metapod with Caterpie, getting access to Harden makes some of the battles after the first fight against Giovanni possible, but thanks to Poison Sting, Kakuna can make use of this strategy much better than Metapod. Thanks to this new bulk, Kakuna is now able to beat Brox's Onix, the Rebel's Pidgeotto on the SSN, Erika's Victreebel and Vileplume, Koga's Koffings, Giovanni's Nidorino, Rhyhorn and Kangaskhan on Silphco, Bruno's Hitmonchan, and the Rebels' Executor on the champion fight. A lot more individual fights than before, but the most notable thing is that we see the first sweep on this ranking, being able to sweep Erika's team. I did need to use power-up points on Poison Sting, and even then I ended up running out of them on Vileplume, so I had to wait for her to knock herself out with Struggle. But it was still a sweep nonetheless, showing the power of stalling and poison. Well, maybe not poison because they're immune to it, but you get the idea. As for the negatives, once again the poison typing makes it weak to all of the Kadabras and Alakazams in the game, which, believe me, there are many. Also, only having Poison Sting as an attacking move, while useful for the poison status, is not nearly enough for raw damage against most Pokemon, which can be seen in the fact that it only got a sweep against Erika, which, while impressive for a Pokemon like Kakuna and getting him a score of 13.88, it's not that amazing when compared to Pokemon that are higher on the list. Now we start getting into the more real Pokemon, and at number 8, this is going to be Venonat. Now, something that I should explain is how I'm going to be grading Pokemon that are obtained after the first gym. So the score that was given according to the fight is now going to result in 2 different percentages. One that's for the whole game, even for the fights that the Pokemon couldn't take part of, and another that's going to be for only the fights that are after obtaining that Pokemon. Then those are going to be averaged out, and that's going to give the final score. That way, Pokemon that are obtained later aren't going to be punished as much just because you get them at a later point in the game, but it's still going to play a role on the final score. I feel like that's as fair as the score can get, but if any of you have any other suggestions, you can write them in the comments. Now going back to Venonat with amazing special moves in Giga Drain and Psychic and hitting really hard with return from his superior physical attack, he managed to do decently against many of the individual fights. He also has access to the amazing combination of Sleep Powder and Compound Ice. You see, Sleep Powder is 75% accurate, meaning that while useful, it's not the most reliable strategy. This changes thanks to the ability Compound Ice, boosting the accuracy to 97.5%. So if there's a slower Pokemon, it can almost guarantee a victory on an individual fight. Thanks to all of this, Venonat was able to get 2 sweeps, one against Erika and one against Koga. For both of them, it was just spamming super effective Psychic, which you can get the TM for at that point in the game. Now if you're wondering why only those, this is where we get to the negatives, and there are many. First, Venonat is only available after you get the Pokeflute, meaning that the first fight that you're going to be able to use him is at the Grass Gym, way later than all of the other bug types on the list. This means that Venonat misses on 13 different fights. Second, while getting Psychic, Giga Drain, and Return is nice, there's no stab move that he can take advantage of besides the incredibly weak Leech Life, which in this generation is only 20 base power. There's also the TM4 Sludge Bomb, which would be nice as a neutral move, but it's only available in the post-game. Third, and this is a continuation of the last one, but there's also the fact that he only gets one good physical move, Return, which almost every Pokemon gets, by the way. In a game where physical attackers are probably at their worst, with many rock types with high defense and intimidate users. So most of the time, you're going to depend on your lower special attack. Speaking of, fourth is the stats. While 60 HP, 50 defense and 55 special defense is not really frail for a first form, it's definitely not bulky. While 55 attack and 40 special attack is not really weak, it's definitely not strong. And 45 speed, well, you get the idea. And last, remember the strategy of using Sleep Powder? Well, 45 speed doesn't really outspeed much. So good luck trying to get that to work against an entire team. And even if you do, Venonat doesn't even have a setup move to take advantage of it. No Growth, no Coal Mine, not even Harden. There's one Pokemon that's going to make better use of that strategy, but that's going to be later. So with all of that, Venonat gets a final score of 29.92. At number 7, as the best first form bug type, not counting Scyther, this is going to be Paras. Now this one has a way better moveset. Obtaining hit on Mount Moon, he learns the M moves like Dig, Thief, and Aerial Ace for some reason. As for the level up moves, they get even better, with Giga Drain as a stab move, Spore for guaranteed sleep, and even a setup move in Growth. It's a bit of a shame that the only bug move it gets is Leech Life, because with an attack stat of 70, he could have used one. But even without a reliable bug move, we see 4 sweeps from Paras. Those were against Misty, Lieutenant Surge, and both Giovanni on Silph Go and as a gym leader. For Misty, I had to use the TM4 Bullet Seed to defeat Staryu, and it did so with only 4 shots. As for Starmie, even if Leech Life wasn't that strong, with the recovery, I was able to slowly defeat her. For Lieutenant Surge, I only used Dig. Once again, the 70 attack really boosted Paras' performance. Finally, for Giovanni, access to Growth and Spore made it easy to set up against one of his Pokemon, allowing me to sweep with Giga Drain. Now, all of this sounds good, but the problem with Paras is that even if he has a pretty decent attack stat, every other stat is god-awful. With 25 speed, you don't really outspeed much, meaning the landing Spore becomes way too dangerous. Especially with an HP stat of 35 and both defenses being 55, which is not nearly enough for a Pokemon with 2 4x weaknesses and 4 2x weaknesses. Another issue with Paras is that even while having Growth to boost his special attack, the only moves that can take advantage of that are Bullet Seed, Giga Drain, Solar Beam, and Thief, with Thief being only 40 base power. So if you somehow manage to outspeed something, put it to sleep with Spore, set up a substitute, and then start setting up Growths, you better hope that they are either weak to Dark or at least neutral to Grass. Because if not, you might be better off just using physical attacks. Something that I should also mention is the ability. Because while having a chance to paralyze, sleep, or poison an opponent sounds nice, it's way too unreliable, having a 10% chance for any of these effects to happen. So more often than not, I found it to be a nuisance for the rankings since it made fights inconsistent and sometimes even messed up strategies with Spore. Still, all of this allows Paras to get a final score of 37.5. Coming in at number 6, we get our first fully evolved Pokemon, and it's Parasect, evolving right after Misty at level 24. Now, how the ranking is going to go for evolved Pokemon is that I'm going to take the performance of the pre-evolution for the score until the Pokemon is able to evolve. So, for example, with Parasect, because he evolves after Misty, I'm going to take the results of Paras for the fights against the rival on Nugget Bridge and against Misty. And then, when he evolves, I'm going to do the fights with Parasect and get the new results. Going into the positives, he gets a boost to all of his stats upon evolution, getting way bulkier and hitting a bit harder now. He doesn't get any new moves, well, besides Hyper Beam, but it's not like he's going to use it since Return is way more reliable. With this new stat, he does much better on the individual fights, being able to take more advantage of his good coverage. He's also now able to sweep Giovanni on the Rocket Hideout, Erika, and Sabrina. This was mostly because of the boost to his defenses. Now, going on to the reason as to why he's the lowest fully evolved Pokemon, the main reason is the same as Paras, having way too many weaknesses, not having a good Bug-type move, and being way too slow. As even though he got a boost to all of his stats, Speed only got 5 points, going from 25 to 30, which is not nearly enough. This is also the reason as to why it did so well against individual battles compared to full teams. Because while Parasect is bulky enough so that being outsped isn't an issue while dealing with one Pokemon, against 5 Pokemon is just not enough. Because even while getting Growth, Spore, and Substitute, there's almost no fights where you can take advantage of that combination. Let's take the fight against Blue on Silphco as an example. He leads with Pidgeot and does more than half with Wing Attack while I put him to sleep with Spore. He stays asleep and I go for Substitute, and usually he then wakes up and defeats the Substitute while I go for Growth. So because he's still outspeed, I end up going down. Maybe if he got Agility or 20 more points to Speed he would have been more usable, but with what he has, he only gets 47.5 points, which is only 10 more than Paras. Now, surprisingly enough, number 5 is going to be Venomoth. I say that because a weird thing happened between Venomoth and Parasect, and that is that throughout the whole game, Parasect ended up being more useful. However, from the moment you obtain it, Venomoth is way better. So when you average those out, Venomoth gets more points. As for the positives, upon evolution, which is at level 31, so you can get it immediately after Erika, it gains a bunch of stats that it wanted before. Now it has 10 more HP, 10 more attack, 10 more defense, and 20 more special defense. But the most important ones are a massive boost of 45 to speed and a whopping 50 to special attack, now making better use of both Psychic and Giga Drain. It also gains some decent coverage with Aerial Ace, and it finally has a decent Bug-type move, Silver Wind with 60 base power. It's a great move for Venomoth, especially for those Psychic types that hit him for super effective damage, since now that it has 90 speed, it's easier to outspeed them. With all of this, Venomoth was able to get many more individual victories and now sweep Giovanni on Silphco, Blaine, Giovanni as a gym leader, and the rival Squirtle and Bulbasaur team before the league. If you're wondering about how it swept through Blaine, I used both Substitute and Protect to make his Pokemon run out of Fire Blast power points. Turns out they either don't have another fire move or they have Fire Spin, which doesn't do chip damage if you have a Substitute. Now, getting to the ugly part, unfortunately, it seems like way too much time has passed between the evolution process, because Venomoth's eyesight got worse, and he lost the ability Compound Eyes, now having Shield Dust, which makes the strategy of using Sleep Powder way less reliable now. There's also the issues that carry over from Venonat, like getting him late, as even though he's great from the moment you get it, for the overall game, he doesn't do enough. There's also still no poison attacking move, and as a defensive typing, it doesn't do much. Oh, and remember how I said that he got the bug move Silver Wind? Well, that's only after getting the 7th patch, because for some reason you need to use the move reminder to get that move, and that's only available at the Sevii Islands. Like I said, Venomoth isn't bad, it just needs to be catchable at an earlier route. Like, maybe right next to Diglett's cave. Or maybe if it kept Compound Eyes. But as it stands, Venomoth gets a score of 49.46. At number 4, this is going to be Beedrill. With early access to one of maybe 4 usable Bug-type attacking moves in Twiddle, Harden to increase the defense, coverage options in Brick Break, Aerial Ace, and Giga Drain if you really want to, and a decent speed, attack, and special defense stat, he manages to sweep through 11 trainers. Those were Misty, the Charmander and Squirtle rival on the SSN, Lieutenant Surge, the Squirtle rival on Pokemon Tower, Erika, Koga, Giovanni on Silphco, Sabrina, Giovanni as a gym leader, and finally Agatha. Most of these fights were won using either Twin Needle or one of the coverage options previously mentioned, with the most interesting fights being Koga, Giovanni on Silphco, Sabrina, Giovanni as a gym leader, and Agatha. For these fights, I had to use a setup move alongside Substitute, Harden for Koga, Giovanni and Agatha, and Agility for Sabrina and Agatha as well. Surprising was Agatha, as I had to use two setup moves, Harden to increase Beedrill's defense against Ghost and flying moves, and Agility to outspeed the Gengars. Also, the attacking move I went for in this fight was Aerial Ace, not only because it's the only neutral move I have against the Gengar line, but also because it bypasses the evasion increase from Double Team. As for what Beedrill struggles with, fast or bulky Pokemon with super effective moves can be an issue, like Pidgeot or Alakazam. Teams with Intimidate can also be a problem since Beedrill is a physical attacker, and while his coverage options are nice, he really wants to have either a ground or a rock type moves to hit more Pokemon for super effective damage, because sometimes the decent attack stat just isn't enough. Speaking of moves, there's also the issue of not having a good stab poison move. Not like it were too much in terms of coverage, but I believe that having Sludge Bomb would have done a lot for his neutral coverage, going from Return, which is 102 base power at Matt's Friendship, to 135 if we count Stab. Also, while the ability Swarm that gives a boost to Puck moves is nice, it doesn't really come up that much since Puck doesn't hit that many types for 2 times damage. And if in the middle of a fight I get brought to that range, either it doesn't matter or it's too late. Still, for being an early, fully evolved Puck Pokemon, getting the 4th spot on this list with a score of 59.24, it's pretty impressive. For the number 3 spot, this is Scyther. Really high attack, really high speed. This, I would say, is a more realistic Pokemon that you could use for a playthrough and be perfectly fine. Especially since you can get him for a decent price at the game corner, which you can do after Lieutenant Surge. He just dominates on the individual fights and does really well on most team fights. The best thing about this Pokemon is that he's one of only 3 Pokemon that gets the move Swords Dance by level up, with the only other way of obtaining it being via a move tutor that's on the post-game. This brings Scyther's attack to ridiculous levels, and it gets even better with attacks like Stab Aerial Ace, Steel Wing for rock types, and Stab Fury Cutter. With all of this, he's able to sweep through the rivals Charmander and Squirtle team on Pokemon Tower, Erika, Koga, all of the rivals teams on Silphco, Sabrina, Blaine, all of the rivals teams before the league, Agatha, and the rivals Charmander team as a champion. As for the unfortunate part of Scyther, weirdly enough, he'd rather not be a Puck type. It makes him struggle way too much against rock types defensively, and offensively, even when having a Puck type move, he's better off using either Aerial Ace or Return. That's because Fury Cutter is a move that relies on hitting consecutively, starting with a pathetic base power of 10, getting multiplied by 2 every time you land it. And I say land it because it has an accuracy of 95. And if for some reason you miss or change moves, it goes back to doing no damage. Now, why would you use that move when you could just set up a Swords Dance and go for Aerial Ace? You hit more types for neutral damage, it's a move that ignores accuracy, and it also gets the same type attack bonus. Oh, and there's also the fact that you get Fury Cutter at level 46. Don't even bother with that move. Also, if you noticed, I haven't mentioned Scyther's defenses. That's because they are not great. He relies on being faster and hitting hard, so when that doesn't work, he just faints. This can be seen against the trainers with Rock-type Pokemon or attacks and the trainers with Intimidate. Finally, he just doesn't have almost any coverage. He only has Thief, Steel Wing, Aerial Ace, Return, and Rock Smash. He does hit most types for neutral damage, but he could really use a water or a grass type move for the rock and ground types, because Steel Wing is not enough, even with Swords Dance. So with that, Scyther ends up with a score of 66.35. For the penultimate spot, this is Pinsir. Now, most of the things I've said about Scyther get better on Pinsir. A greater attack stat, more physical defense, you get him at the game corner, and he also gets Swords Dance. Now he does get the move at level 49, which is after the 7th gym, but don't worry, because he gets another setup move that works just as fine. Bulk Up. He's the only non-fighting type to get this move, well, besides legendaries, and it raises his attack and defense. It can be obtained in Silph and thanks to having a great ability in Hyper Cutter that ignores the opponent's attempts at lowering his attack, it works even better than Sword Stance on most fights. Going to the moves, once again, they are great. He may not get Aerial Ace, Steel Wing or a Bug type move, but instead he gets Dig, Earthquake, Rock Slide and Brick Break, which give him a lot more types to hit for super effective damage. With this, he's able to sweep through almost every fight he's available for. So, if we have great stats, useful ability, and an incredible moveset, then why is he number 2? Well, 2 things. One is the place where you get him. While being available after Lieutenant Surge isn't that late into the game, he does miss out on 9 fights. So unfortunately, that does make him lose some points. And 2, while he defeated almost everyone, he did struggle against Koga's team fight, the Rebels Charizard and his team before the league, the Rivals Charizard and Arcanine as a champion, and all of the Rivals champion fights, with the team fights making him lose a lot of points. The fire types just outsped and one-shot Pinsir with either Flamethrower or Fire Blast. I know that losing first place just because he's available later seems dumb, but that's just how my system works. Still, getting 74.6 points in the end is a really good result for a bug type. And coming in at number 1, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, it's Butterfree. Now calm down, I know what you're thinking, but hear me out because I couldn't believe this either. Let's go in order of the fights. Against Brock, you use Stun Spore against Geodude and then set up Seeds Hardens. With this and Confusion, you're able to easily defeat Brock. With the new level cap of 21, you get access to the first part of the ultimate moveset, Sleep Powder. It's usually 75% accurate, but thanks to Butterfree's ability, Compound Ice, it's raised to 97.5, just like Venonat. This allows him to sweep the rival on Nugget Bridge, Misty with the help of the 5th TM, and the rival on the SSN. With access to God, you get the second piece of the puzzle, Dream Eater. If you talk to this NPC of Viridian City, he'll teach one of your Pokemon Dream Eater, a 100 base power psychic move that can heal you depending on the damage that you dealt. Let me repeat that, 100 base power, psychic type, it can heal you. The drawback is that it only works on Pokemon that are asleep, but with Sleep Powder and Butterfree's decent speed, it's not that much of an issue. Butterfree is then able to sweep through Lieutenant Surge, the rival on Pokemon Tower, Giovanni on Celadon, and Erika. Finally, for the last move for the ultimate moveset, in Fuchsia City, there's the move tutor for Substitute. So the strategy is to use Sleep Powder, set up a Substitute, and then attack with Dream Eater. If they wake up, the Substitute is going to nullify any incoming attack, allowing me to repeat the process. If I KO the opponent's Pokemon, the Substitute carries over to their next Pokemon, giving me an advantage in case they outspeed me. And as if that wasn't enough, I also got the leftovers for passive recovery. This setup allowed me to sweep through Koga, the rival on Silph, Giovanni on Silph, Sabrina with the help of the Aerial Ace TM, Blaine, the rival before the league, Lorelei with the help of the Giga Drain TM, Bruno, Agatha, and even Lance, this time with the help of Harden of all things. Unfortunately, that's where the sweeps end. Well, technically. See, if I use Silverwind as Butterfree's 4th move and get an Omni Boost against Pidgeot, I can safely sweep through Blue's champion team. But it depends way too much on luck. And you have like 2 or 3 chances of getting the Omni Boost before getting knocked out. If I don't go for Silverwind, then I have to go for String Shot to outspeed critical threats like Pidgeot, Alakazam, or Charizard. And thanks to having only one attacking move, I end up running out of power points even after using 3 power point ups on Dream Eater. As for other issues, like you guessed from how I talk about the champion fights, even with Butterfree's decent speed, You just wish he was a bit faster, because he could have really used that for the champion fight. Either that or a 5th move slot, because on some fights he could have used another attacking move for coverage. I should also mention that even though Butterfree swept through almost every team, against individual Pokemon there were some fights that, realistically, were not possible. These fights were Roxas Onix, the Rebels Charizard on Silph and before the league, Lance's Aerodactyl, and the Rebels Charizard on his champion team. Now, with all that said, besides those fights, I didn't have any issues with Butterfree, giving him a final score of 92.86. If you still don't believe it, give Sleep Powder Dream Eater Butterfree a try, it will surprise you. Now, as something that I feel like I should mention, Butterfree is the only Pokemon that can realistically make use of this combo. Since the next best sleeping move are Spore, which is exclusive to the Paras line in this game and he doesn't get Dream Eater, Yawn, which takes a turn to take effect, and the only one that also has Dream Eater is the Slowpoke line, and then there's the less accurate sleeping moves, in which at that point, it's best not to even bother. And if you're wondering about Compound Eyes, the only ones in Fire Red Leaf Green with this ability are both Butterfree and Venonat, and Venonat doesn't get Dream Eater. Anyways, did I miss anything on the ranking? If you think so, let me know in the comments below. That's all I have for now. See ya!